I hadn't been back home in over a year, and truth be told, I wasn't sure I ever wanted to be. But my father was turning 70, and my mother had made it very clear that this dinner wasn't optional. So there I was, walking into Chez Delon, a high-end French restaurant nestled on a quiet corner of San Francisco's Marina District, where white tablecloths were ironed sharper than the tension I felt. Everyone else had already arrived. My sister Michelle was in the center of it all, laughing a little too loudly in a bright designer blazer. Her hand curled tightly around a wine glass. Her husband Greg sat beside her talking shop with Dad, probably about the market or bonds or whatever it was they found endlessly fascinating. "Claire," Michelle called out as she noticed me approaching. "You made it. I was just telling everyone how you're still doing your little drawing thing." I smiled a tight, polite one and took the seat at the far end of the table. "It's called digital art, Michelle," I said softly, unfolding my napkin. "Right, right?" She nodded, eyes flicking over my outfit, simple, clean, nothing flashy. "And you're still living in that tiny loft in Oakland, right? Do you even have a car these days?" "No," I replied, reaching for the breadbasket. "I take the bus." There was a beat of silence. Then her laugh again, a sharp little burst. "You're kidding!" The bus across the table, Dad looked up from his escargot, his expression unreadable. Mom offered an awkward smile and tried to change the subject. "Claire's always been independent," she said carefully. "A free spirit." "Still taking the bus," Greg chimed in, chuckling. "Must be tough hauling art supplies around that way." Michelle leaned over, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "You know," she added, "there's this startup I advise write-up. They do eco-friendly leasing options. I could refer you." I adjusted my sleeve as I reached for my wine glass, and for a brief second, my wrist turned upward. The room's soft lighting caught the face of the watch I wore. A sharp clink followed Dad's fork slipping from his hand and clattering against his plate. His face went pale. He stared at my wrist as if he'd seen a ghost. "That's," he said slowly, his voice suddenly hoarse. "That's a Patek Philippe." The table quieted instantly. You could hear the faint hum of the string quartet playing near the bar. Michelle squinted toward my wrist. "Wait, which model?" Dad leaned forward, almost afraid to believe his eyes. "Is that the Ref 2523 World Time?" Now all eyes were on me. I glanced down at the dial almost casually, then back up. "Oh," I said with a small smile. "This old thing?" Michelle let out a strangled laugh. "You're joking." Greg, suddenly serious, added, "That's a $2 million watch." I shrugged. "Picked it up at the Geneva auction last month. I like the map design." Mom blinked rapidly. "Claire, sweetheart, where did you get the money for that?" "It's vintage," I said, sipping my wine, but still quite functional. Dad was silent. He was still staring, but not at the watch anymore. He was looking at me, really looking, like he hadn't done in years. "I remember that watch," he said quietly. "It was in a magazine I kept in my study. I used to say it was the most beautiful timepiece ever made." "You did?" I nodded. "Every detail, every complication, you knew it all by heart." Michelle looked from Dad to me, clearly uncomfortable now. "But how, Claire, you're still doing what, art online NFTs?" "That's not real money." I set my glass down carefully, leaning back in my chair. "I suppose it depends," I said, "on how you define real." And with that, I let the silence stretch. A heavy, simmering kind of silence. The kind that hinted that something was coming, that something had changed. Dinner resumed, but the energy had shifted. The servers moved around the table with practiced grace, delivering scallops and duck confit. But the once easy laughter had faded into an uneasy murmur. Michelle tried to recapture the spotlight. "Well," she said, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve, "Greg and I just bought our second home in Napa. It's modest, only 6,000 square feet, but we needed the wine cellar." Dad chuckled, grateful for a return to familiar ground. "Real estate is still the best investment." Mom nodded, "especially now that Michelle's a partner. All those years at Morgan Stanley paid off." Michelle beamed. 12 years of 70-hour weeks, Dad. Not everyone's cut out for the long haul." Her eyes slid toward me. I stayed quiet, dabbing my mouth with a linen napkin. "You know," Greg added, "it's not too late to pivot, Claire. You could still get certified in finance, or even UX design, something practical." I smiled faintly. I like what I do. Digital paintings, Michelle asked. Is that still viable? I mean, I've seen those Cartoon Ape things. Are you making like commission work for Twitch streamers? She's doing something with NFTs, Mom added cautiously. But I don't really understand it. Michelle rolled her eyes. Of course, NFTs. That bubble popped, didn't it? No, I said simply. It evolved. Michelle arched an eyebrow. So what exactly do you do, still living in that little warehouse thing in Oakland? It's a studio loft, I replied. Greg smirked. Does it even have a door or just curtains? Dad set down his wine glass. Claire's always preferred her independence, he said, though, without conviction. It's just, Michelle began, then sighed. You're 34, no husband, no children, no house, still wearing thrifted sweaters. You can't expect to live like that forever. I didn't answer. Mom tried a softer approach. You know we worry. It's not that we don't support you, honey, but your sister chose a path, a stable one that lets her contribute, build a future, Michelle added. At some point, you stop chasing dreams and start building a life. Dad looked across the table at me. What about health insurance? I laughed quietly. I have insurance, Dad. Through the government, he asked, genuinely unsure. No, through my company. You have a company, Michelle said skeptically. I do. What's it called? Greg asked, already pulling out his phone. I'll look it up. I shook my head. It's not public-facing. Michelle frowned. So it's not successful. I set down my fork and looked her in the eye. Actually, it's been bootstrapped since 2019. Fully funded now. Global partnerships in place. Greg raised an eyebrow. Funded by who, Sequoia? SoftBank, Pantera. It's been a busy year. No one said anything. A breeze of awkwardness passed over the table like a chill. Michelle tried to recover. Wait, Claire. Are you telling me you're actually involved with Etherframe, that NFT platform making waves in Asia? I didn't answer right away. You've heard of it, I asked. Of course. Our firm was just briefed on them. They onboarded 60% of Korean creators last quarter, and the founder, whoever it is impossible to track down. The press calls her Ashin Gyen, some anonymous artist with a huge cult following. My silence said everything. Greg's fork froze halfway to his mouth. No way, Michelle breathed. You're Ashin Gyen, I shrugged lightly. You're telling me the Ashin Gyen who sold the Voices in the Cloud series for $38 million last year. That's you, I nodded. Michelle sat back stunned. But you've been living simply, I finished for her. Yeah, I prefer it. Dad blinked. That can't be right. That watch wasn't a loaner, I said, and the apartment I rent is by choice. It's 2 blocks from my team's co-working space, and I like walking to work. Greg laughed, but it was hollow now. Claire, I thought you were broke. I know. Michelle swallowed hard. You've been flying under the radar. All this time, I smiled. It's easier to build quietly, especially when people underestimate you. The table fell into silence again. This time it felt heavier. Nobody reached for their food. Mom finally asked, "But why wouldn't you tell us? I didn't think it would matter," I said honestly. You were all so sure I had nothing to offer. Dad leaned forward again, his eyes fixed on the watch at my wrist like it held all the answers. The Patek 2523, he murmured. I used to have a picture of that in my study. You kept it framed on the bookshelf, I replied. The world time model with the cloisonné enamel dial. You used to say it was the most elegant piece of mechanical art ever made. His mouth parted, but no words came. Michelle cut in clearly, trying to recalibrate. You seriously bought that at Auction Geneva, you said? I nodded. Last month, Christie's. Bidding went a little higher than I expected, but I was determined. Dad blinked. It went over 5% above the high estimate. There was a bidding war. There was, I said. He stared at me. You drove the price up. I had to make sure I got it. But why, he asked softly. I glanced at him. Because you always said it was your dream piece. I wasn't going to let it slip away again. Mom's hand reached for her glass of Chardonnay. Her fingers trembled. I don't understand, she said. You take the bus. You wear $10 sweaters. And you own that I like to stay focused, I said. Noise makes it hard to create. Greg spoke up again, this time slower. So, Ether Frame. That's yours. I nodded. You built the platform from scratch. With what Team 4 developers? 2 artists, 1 operations lead. All remote. We started on weekends. Dad shook his head slowly. But you were living in that garage. I said, in 2018, after Michelle convinced you to cut me out of Grandpa's inheritance. Michelle stiffened. That was not my decision. It was, I said gently. And it's fine, honestly, it pushed me to focus. I couldn't afford to fail. Mom looked between us, visibly shaken. Claire, why didn't you tell us sooner? Because success was never about proving anything to you. I didn't need a validation stamp. Michelle leaned forward, voice sharp now. You realize how ridiculous this all sounds. No car, no assistant, no Chanel bag. And yet you're sitting here in a $2 million Patek like it's a Swatch. I smiled again. The funny thing about wealth, I said, is that when it's real, it doesn't need to yell. Greg's mouth opened, but before he could speak, my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up and glanced at the screen. Everything okay? Dad asked. Yeah, I replied. Tokyo's just confirming the final draft of our South Korea distribution deal. Michelle looked stunned. You're handling Asia expansion too. We're in 14 countries now, I said. Mostly Asia and Europe. We onboarded the Thai Culture Ministry last month to digitize their national art archives. Greg cleared his throat. What's the latest valuation? Last round closed at $9.8 billion, I said. SoftBank led it. Our oversubscription was just under $3 billion. Michelle's jaw clenched. 9.8. We're about to cross 10, I added. Valuations are volatile, but post-merger it'll settle higher. Merger, Dad asked. With an AI-driven creative tools platform, I said. They're based in Singapore. Their CEO and I go back years. Michelle's face changed. Wait a minute. Quantum Frame? I didn't answer. You're merging with Quantum Frame. We've been negotiating due diligence on that deal, I'm aware, I said. We've been watching your firm closely. Greg exhaled like all the air had been knocked out of him. Michelle tried one last time. Okay, but why the secrecy? Why the bus? Why the sweaters from thrift stores? I looked at her for a long second. Because while you were chasing approval, I said I was building freedom. The silence that followed was not awkward this time. It was reverent, like something sacred had just passed between us. Dad's eyes were glassy now. He looked down at the watch again. His voice, when it came, was quiet. I lost everything in 2008, he said. My whole collection. Gone overnight. That watch was the one I never stopped thinking about. I know, I replied. That's why I had to get it. You remembered every story, every lecture, every page you folded in that old Sotheby's catalog. His hands trembled slightly. Claire. It was my dream. It still is, I said. And dreams shouldn't have to die just because we couldn't afford them once. I unbuckled the strap. Here, I said, extending the watch toward him. It was always yours. Dad froze. I can't, he whispered. It's too much. I bought 2, I said. Mine's in Zurich. I only wear this one when I come home. 2, Michelle said barely above a whisper. I nodded. 1 masterpiece per continent seemed reasonable. The watch sat in my father's palm, now delicate and impossibly rare. He looked down at it like it might disappear. I don't know what to say, he murmured. You don't have to say anything, I told him. You already did years ago when you taught me what it meant to value precision, to love beauty, and to build things that last. Greg looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Michelle just sat there, stunned. I didn't plan to say more. I could have let the silence speak for me. But something about the way my father was holding that watch like it was a memory he had given up on made me want to fill in the rest. Not out of spite, but out of truth. Do you remember when I told you I wanted to go to art school? I asked, my voice calm. Dad looked up confused at first, then nodded slowly. You said no, I continued. Said it was impractical, a phase, that I should follow Michelle into finance. I didn't mean to, he started, but I raised a hand gently. It's okay. You were scared. 2008 nearly broke us. You sold your collection, we moved into a smaller place, and the only thing that seemed safe was money. I turned to Michelle. And when Grandpa passed, you told Dad I shouldn't get a share of the inheritance, that I'd waste it. Michelle opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes shifted. You said I wasn't capable of handling money, I said. That I was naive, irresponsible. That I was chasing fantasy. I was trying to protect you, she said almost defensively. You had no plan. You were sketching on your tablet and selling random things online. I nodded. That's true. I didn't have a clear path, but I knew what I wanted to build. I wanted to give artists a way to make a living without being exploited. Claire, Mom said softly, we never stopped loving you. I know, I replied, my voice warmer now, but love sometimes gets tangled in fear. I took a breath. In 2018, I was broke. I was living in the garage behind an old coffee shop. I built my first smart contract by candlelight because the power got cut off that week. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor, but every night I kept drawing, kept coding. I learned solidity from YouTube videos and scraped by selling illustrations for $20 a piece. Dad was watching me frozen. One day, someone from South Korea bought one of my pieces for 0.8 ETH. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but it was enough to buy groceries. Then more came. I started minting my own work, built a small following. Then I realized if I could do it, maybe other artists could too. Michelle blinked rapidly, her expression unreadable. That's how Etherframe started, I said. Not in a boardroom, not with funding, but in the corner of a garage with a sketch pad, a cracked laptop, and a vision. I turned to my mother. And all that time I didn't tell you, because I wanted to know, really know, that I could make something from nothing, not for revenge, just to prove to myself that I was more than what you all thought I was. Claire, Dad said again, his voice almost breaking. Why didn't you say anything when we visited you that Thanksgiving? You barely spoke. Because I had $28 in my checking account and I didn't want you to see me like that. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. I didn't want pity, I added. I wanted to earn your respect without begging for it. Greg finally spoke, his voice low. You did. I looked at him surprised. You earned it 100 times over, he said. I just didn't know how far ahead of us you were. I nodded once. I didn't want to be ahead, I said. I just wanted to be free. Dad swallowed hard. The watch sat in his palm unmoving. But everything else, our history, our assumptions, the way they had shaped me, moved all around it. The room was still. Outside, the city went on cars humming past the clink of silverware from other tables. But inside our little circle, time had slowed. Michelle, who had always been the loudest, was the first to break the silence. So she said, her voice thinner now, what happens next? You IPO or something? I gave her a half smile. Maybe, maybe not. I don't need to rush. But you could write, Greg said. I mean, if the last round was 9.8 billion. We were oversubscribed by nearly 3, I said. The term sheets came in within 48 hours. Greg blinked. 3 billion. We closed in 2 rounds. Seed was Friends and Artists. The Series B was Sequoia Pantera and one family office in Dubai. Michelle cleared her throat. What? What kind of revenue are you seeing now? I turned to her gently. Do you really want to compare metrics, Michelle? She flushed, looking away. Dad spoke next, quieter than the others. Do people know it's you behind the platform? Some do, I said. Investors, artists, but not the press. I didn't want my name to overshadow the work. You used to sign everything CN, even as a kid, he said with a faint smile. I still do. Digitally now. He looked down at the Patek, then back at me. You remembered what mattered. I remembered everything you taught me, I said. You didn't think I was listening when you talked about design and legacy. But I was. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, I saw not the stern man who had measured me against Michelle, but the father who once sat beside me, flipping through catalogs and murmuring about balance, proportion, and elegance. It was never about money for you, he said. No, I said. It was about building something perfect, something useful, something that lasted. A notification lit up my phone again. I checked it quickly. What now? Mom asked hesitantly. Our Korea licensing partner just got government approval, I said. We'll be opening the Seoul Gallery node next month. First digital exhibition of national works. Michelle looked like she was calculating something in her head. Eyes narrowed slightly. She said cautiously, we're representing a couple of crypto clients now. Tech-forward portfolios. Maybe there's room to, I appreciate it, I said calmly. But we're fully allocated for this year. Besides, we tend to work with firms that supported us before the press did. She flinched slightly. Greg tried a different approach. What about your next round? Or real estate exposure? I mean, my portfolio could. We're not looking for outside advisors right now. I said polite, but firm. He blinked, clearly not used to being turned down. Dad leaned in again. So what's next for you, Singapore? I said. End of the week. We're finalizing the merger with Quantum Frame. Michelle inhaled sharply. So it is them. We go live next quarter. Their generative AI will power our creator tools. Our distribution will handle their back-end marketplace. That'll make you... Greg trailed off. Unicorn status doesn't really apply anymore, I said. But it'll change the space. A lot. Your name's going to be in the Financial Times, Michelle said. I know, I signed off on the embargo. Greg rubbed his temples. I just can't believe we didn't see this coming. I sipped my water. That's kind of the point, isn't it? I didn't want to be seen until the work could speak louder than the noise. Dad was still staring at the Patek. It's flawless, he said softly. Every angle. It reminded me of you, I told him. The way you used to talk about engineering, about beauty serving function. He looked at me a little stunned. I thought you hated those talks, he said. You always seemed distracted. I was absorbing, I said. Even when I was sketching. You were the first person who ever made me care about precision. Tears welled in his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. You earned this, he said, holding up the watch. So did you. I said, that's why it's yours. For a moment, there was no pretense, no family roles, no sister versus sister. Just a father and daughter reconnecting through something small and quiet and profoundly meaningful. Outside, the sun had dipped just low enough to bathe the windows in amber light. Inside, everything looked softer now, quieter, not defeated, but finally aware. The check came, but no one reached for it. For once, nobody was trying to show off. Michelle stirred her coffee in silence, eyes lowered. Mom was dabbing at the corner of her eye with her napkin, though she was trying not to make a scene. Dad was still holding the watch, gently turning it over in his hands, like it was something sacred. I stood and stepped around the table, leaning down next to him. It's really yours, I said again. I can't accept it, he said, but the words were hollow. His fingers refused to let go. You can, I told him, and you will. But Claire, I bought it for you. You know that, right? The second I saw it listed, I didn't hesitate. I had already bought one for myself in Zurich, but when this one came up, I knew it was yours. He looked up at me, the lines on his face softening. I lost everything he said, voice low. My collection, my confidence, my sense of worth. I sat back down beside him. And you taught me how to rebuild all of that. You just didn't know it. Across the table, Michelle finally looked up. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I was hard on you, she said. Too hard. I didn't respond. I thought I was doing the right thing, that I was setting a standard. But the truth is, I just wanted to feel like I had done everything right, that I had made the smart choice. You did, I said. Your path worked for you. She nodded slowly. But I was wrong about you. You weren't the only one. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry we didn't see you, she said. We thought you were lost, Claire. I admitted, but sometimes you need to get lost to find your own way. The waiter returned, clearing plates as gently as possible, sensing the quiet gravity of the moment. I reached for my phone and tapped the screen. Dad glanced at me. More updates from Tokyo, no, I said, standing up. I actually have something else. I pulled 2 envelopes from my bag and placed them on the table. What's this, Mom asked. Tickets, I said. First class. Singapore, Dad repeated. I want you both to come with me next week, I said. We're launching the quantum merger and we're opening our new HQ. I'd like you to see it, to see what I built. Mom covered her mouth again. You want us there? Of course, I said. You're part of the story whether you realized it or not. Dad held the envelope carefully as if it were made of something fragile. I never imagined, he said, that the little girl sketching in the corner while I rambled about watch dials would go on to build something like this. I did, I said, even when no one else did. Greg stood awkwardly, reaching across the table. I know I've made assumptions, he said. I was wrong too. If there's ever a way I can help, or if your company ever needs, we're fully staffed and fully funded, I said gently. But thank you. Michelle gave a dry laugh. That's the nicest rejection I've ever heard. I smiled. It's not personal. I just have everything I need. She nodded. Yeah, I can see that now. As the family gathered their things, putting on coats and scarves, I caught sight of Dad slipping the watch onto his wrist. It looked like it had always belonged there. Outside, the air had cooled. My breath came in soft clouds. Dad walked beside me while the others called for cars. His voice was soft when he finally spoke. You still take the bus? I nodded. To the office, to the airport. It clears my head. He shook his head, chuckling. You're one of the wealthiest people I've ever met, and you ride the bus. I'm also one of the busiest, I said. And sometimes the simplest way is the most peaceful. He looked down at the watch on his wrist, then back at me. You've changed, he said. No, I replied. I just grew into who I was always trying to be. We stood there for a while, just the two of us. The others were still saying goodbye to the valet, but Dad and I remained near the curb where the city lights pooled in soft gold over the pavement. He held out his arm, letting the streetlight glint off the dial of the watch. You know, he said, this was always more than just a timepiece to me. I know, I said. It represented something precise, something rare, something human, a commitment to excellence that couldn't be faked. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the man who had doubted me. I saw the man who once upon a time had taught me the value of craft, of silence, of building with care. That's what I built, I said quietly. Not just a platform, not just code. Something precise, something rare. He nodded slowly, his eyes a little misty. I always wondered why you worked so hard on those computers, he said. Why you didn't just follow Michelle into a safe career. I didn't get it. But now... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture, one he hadn't seen in years. It was me at 12 years old sitting cross-legged in his old study. On the wall behind me, the Sotheby's catalog he had framed. And in my hands, a mechanical watch I was trying to sketch. I used to sit here, I said, and imagine that one day I'd build something that mattered. Something people would try to copy but couldn't. Because it wasn't just about money. It was about the story behind it. He looked down at the real version now resting on his own wrist. It's yours now, I said, but it's always been part of me. Behind us, Michelle and Greg were loading into their car. Mom waved gently from the back seat. I nodded to her. You heading out? Dad asked. Not yet, I said. I'm taking the bus home. He raised an eyebrow. Seriously, I laughed. Seriously. I've got a whole playlist queued up, and the ride gives me time to think. He smiled. Some things don't change, some things shouldn't, I replied. As I walked away, I heard Michelle explaining something to Greg about creator economy markets, her voice no longer condescending, just curious. Maybe she'd finally start seeing the world through a wider lens. I stepped onto the bus a few minutes later. The driver gave a nod, and I tapped my card. The seat by the window was open just like always. I sat down, pulled out my phone, not the newest model, just one that worked, and opened the app that ran our internal systems. There were updates from Tokyo, a message from Zurich, and an approval request from Seoul. But I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened my photos and scrolled back to Dad's old collection. The ones I used to study like blueprints for a life no one else thought I could build. And then I smiled, because sometimes the best revenge isn't showing off what you've earned. It's restoring what someone else lost. Sometimes success isn't loud. It's silent, intentional, deep. And sometimes, taking the bus doesn't mean you're broke. It means you're too busy building an empire to care what anyone else thinks.